Hi, welcome back to Soul Light Reflections. Last week's episode, we talked all about the crumbling before the calm of the end of this year. And today I want to talk about healing because we're going to still be in that healing process as the new year starts. Like I mentioned in the last episode, it's not going to be this, oh, it's the new year and then everything is fine. I think that sometimes we have this mentality that healing is something that we have to do once and we might have to tackle it for a long time, but eventually we'll be fully healed. And sometimes it can feel like, okay, cool, check the box, like learned the lesson, I integrated it, I feel like I moved on. And then sometimes life has this interesting way of kind of circling back and being like, remember this? Like that trigger comes back or that experience happens again and you're like, oh my God, I thought we were over this. And what I've noticed in my own experience is that when those things come back around, it's not always super obvious. It's like we're going through this emotional turmoil, we're going through this experience and it feels very different this time, so we don't necessarily recognize right away that we're actually learning the same lesson again. We're healing through the same thing again. And when I would realize that I'm in these seasons of healing through the same things again or having the same lessons come up again, it used to frustrate the shit out of me. Like, I know this stuff, right? Like I teach this stuff. I facilitate rooms around these things. Lessons like trusting the process, going with the flow, letting go of expectations, releasing your attachment to outcomes. I feel like I say these things all the time and I genuinely mean them. But recently, life, the universe, my spirit guides, higher self, God has asked me to live this again. Not necessarily in like a clearly conceptual way and not even in a way that I necessarily need to share outwardly. What's wild is the lesson itself is not new for me, like at all. Again, it's based around concepts that I actually teach. It's like almost boring and frustrating how familiar it is and how much I feel like I have already worked through this. But the thing about this round of healing through and having this lesson is that there's new depth to it this time. It feels different. It feels deeper. It feels like it's going to integrate even more. And I feel like that's something that we don't necessarily talk about enough. The fact that healing is not about constantly learning new lessons over and over. I genuinely think that when our souls decide to incarnate on this earth, we have a pretty short list overall of the certain lessons that we're going to learn. And yes, within each of those bigger lessons, we tend to learn like a bunch of little tiny ones. But I think that in general, we come to this earth knowing that there is a set, let's say 5, I don't know how many, but 5 rules. Okay, I'm going to focus on these things and it's going to keep coming up for me throughout this lifetime. And like I said, it gets presented in many different ways every time. It's kind of like when you're in school and you have those word problems and there's all these different ways that you learn how to get 5 plus 7 is 12, right? But they're giving you all these different like word problems to get you to the same answer every time so that you have real life experience and you know how to integrate that. So we are being asked to meet the same exact truths, the same lessons, but from a deeper, more honest place. From a place that is less defensive, that is less ego-driven, a place where you can't necessarily rely on an identity of like being healed or the guide or the mentor or the facilitator. I feel like this is the universe, God's way of keeping us very humble on our healing process because there are absolutely some teachers, some facilitators, some healers that believe that they are fully healed, believe that they are enlightened, believe that they don't have any more healing to do. And I'm sorry, but I think that is complete bullshit. We are always healing more and further. It might not be in the same way every time, but again, we are finding new depth to it. And yes, we might have more experience in that realm because of the experiences and the healing that we've been through, but that doesn't mean that one person is any more healed than another. I feel like the really humbling part is, especially as a teacher, as a facilitator, when these lessons come back and they say, okay, so So you've learned the lesson. Cool. Can you actually embody it now while not letting the ego drive? Can you embody it and show other people how to do so while keeping your humility and integrity? Now, I really don't need to go into exactly what has happened to me over the last week, but it has been really fucking intense. But the details aren't like the medicine of this. I truly think that the way that these experiences were delivered to me is the true medicine. What mattered for me was the pause. There was this moment when I realized that I was being asked to stop controlling the narrative. Stop trying to find meaning in everything too fast. Stop trying to control the outcome of everything. Stop needing something to look a certain way in order for something to be worth it or to mean that you are worthy. Instead, I was being called to really take a moment to listen, and not just with my mind. Actually, I needed to really put my mind to the side because that was all ego and it was stopping me from doing what I truly felt was necessary. What I needed to do was sit and listen to my body, to my nervous system, to that inner knowing that tends to be a little bit quiet, our intuition. And we don't necessarily need our intuition to always shout or explain or justify. Sometimes we actually get the most profound downloads and insights when we allow our intuition to stay calm with its very quiet voice and to simply sit with it and listen. And although I definitely had some really, really big emotional releases, I realized that when we are deepening into a lesson, into healing that we feel like we've gotten through many times before, it doesn't have to look dramatic. Sometimes we can simply take a pause. So it might mean that yes, while we're disappointed, we aren't trying to immediately reframe it into something else. Sometimes we just need to sit in that. Or sometimes it stings, it burns, it hurts, and we don't need to recognize what the lesson is right away. We need to take a step back, and rather than rushing to try to make ourselves okay, sitting with it, just being in the suck for a little bit. And to be honest, for me, I let myself sit in that suck for days. I did not try to figure out what the lesson was. I did not try to analyze my thoughts. I simply let myself process and be sad and be frustrated and release in whatever way I needed to, while still finding glimmers of hope and fun throughout the process in little daily things. I think that sometimes there are times that our ego shows up, and it's not necessarily stomping through and being all loud and chaotic. And sometimes it's a little bit more sometimes it's a little bit more disguised. It shows up responsible, self-aware. It's I get the lesson. I know exactly why this happened. I'm going to be fine. And sometimes I think that if we allow ourselves to jump to that too quickly, that can actually be really detrimental, because we kind of try to skip over that integration process. And then a lot of times when we are doing that, instead of really sitting with it and letting our nervous system have a beat, what can happen is that same exact healing process or lesson will show up in a very similar way once again pretty soon after, rather than what I said at the beginning of this episode about how healing moments and experiences might show up in many different ways to teach us the same lesson. And I don't know about you, but I have had experiences on both sides. I've had experiences where I allow the ego to step in too quickly. I don't really take the time to integrate, to process, to release, to grieve. And I just jump to I know everything's working out in my favor. I'm going to be fine. I know exactly what the lesson is. I know why this happened. And then the same thing or very, very similar experience happens. And I'm like, what the heck? I thought I got through this. To me personally, it feels better to go through something like what I went through in the past week, where while it was really, really intense and emotionally, it looked so different than anything else that I had been through while it was teaching me the same lesson, which was releasing attachment from outcomes, releasing expectations, going with the flow, trusting the process. I think the reason that we allow the ego to kind of jump in really quickly sometimes is because when we are asked to be present, to simply sit with something, It feels unresolved. It feels unanswered. Things feel a little messy, a little chaotic for a little bit. And that's uncomfortable. And as human beings, we don't like to be uncomfortable. We are constantly trying to do what we can to find more comfort, to find more safety. And when we are temporarily in that feeling of discomfort, we are very quick to try to change that. And I think that a lot of us struggle with that, if not all of us at some point, especially those of us who have done a lot of that like inner work. Because we've been taught that growth is forward motion, right? It's finding clarity, it's having a resolution. But sometimes growth is simply staying in where you are and then eventually putting one foot in front of the other. Sometimes the growth is in sitting still in the feeling that you would normally bypass, or staying in that feeling of disappointment without blaming yourself, without blaming anyone else, or just simply sitting in the uncertainty without needing to decide what's going to happen or what it means yet. Quick moment to chat about my husband and my company, Lucid Hydration. It is an all-natural functional mushroom electrolyte beverage. It's just a little stick packet that you mix with water. It contains 6 organic functional mushrooms as well as rhodiola rosea, ashwagandha, vitamin B12, L-theanine, and all sorts of other vitamins and minerals that are really good for your brain and your body. The electrolytes are from coconut water powder and sea salt. Fun fact, a lot of other electrolyte products on the market just use simple table salt, which isn't nearly as nutritious or clean. We never use anything artificial in the process, so no artificial ingredients, fillers, flavors, or colors. Use code Rachel, RACHEL, for a nice little discount on your order. You can go to lucidhydration.com or check the link in the show notes. Next little note is that my upcoming retreat is in September. So now is the time to get on the wait list so that the second that the location drops, you can get in there at a really low discounted deposit and then get on an extended payment plan. This is going to be the perfect early fall getaway. And it's going to start a couple days after my birthday, which is really exciting. The link to my website is in the show notes as well. So you can go there and fill out the information to add yourself to my wait list. So as you know, I always like to work in some sort of like tangible thing for you to reflect on or do. And today I think that it's really important for us to notice where we are rushing ourselves. Not necessarily in like the really big ways, but in the small ways, because the small ways are typically the ones that tend to be more impactful because those compound over time. So ask yourself, do I tend to rush to try to feel better? Do I try to rush through emotions? Do I rush to forgive either myself or other people because I don't want that discomfort or that uneasiness? Do you rush to being the bigger person because, again, you just want resolution, you don't want any conflict? Do I remind myself to trust the process before I've actually given my body a chance to catch up? Because although the body does absolutely know what we're feeling before our mind has a moment to catch up, a lot of times in situations like this, triggering experiences that allow us to heal and grow, it almost feels like our mind like overrides things. And although our body can feel it, we need a moment to let the mind and the body kind of like catch up to each other and be talking to each other again. Another thing that I've been sitting with over the last week is how often that saying, trust the process, which you've probably heard me say a million times, gets confused with bypassing our own genuine experience. Trusting the process does not mean that you don't get to feel disappointed or sad. It does not mean that you're not allowed to grieve what it was that you hoped for or had visions of. It doesn't mean that you have to pretend that something didn't matter or that you didn't care about it. Trusting the process simply means that you're not going to abandon yourself when life doesn't go exactly according to plan. A really grounding question to ask yourself is, what part of me is asking to be acknowledged right now? Not fixed, not solved, not healed, not improved, just simply acknowledged. And when we choose to acknowledge that part of ourselves, like be honest with yourself, let your intuition answer and sit with whatever comes up. When we actually acknowledge it, something happens. It's like all of a sudden we've given that space, and then the intensity of the situation kind of like automatically softens a little bit. And it allows the lesson to integrate a little bit more naturally. We don't necessarily have to force meaning out of the experience. It just kind of comes to us. And during that process, it might come to us with a little bit of help, like talking to a friend, like journaling, like meditating, like dancing. Sometimes we need an outward way of integrating in order to let those aha moments come to us. Another thing that I've been reflecting on is expectations, especially the quiet ones. So expectations about how long something should take, expectations about how healed we should be by now, expectations that oh, I already learned that lesson and I don't need to learn it again. I genuinely don't think that life repeats lessons in order to punish us. I think that these lessons repeat when we are trying to meet the lessons with performance. Again, letting that ego step in before we allow ourselves to sit with something. So the goal is to start meeting those healing experiences, those lessons, honestly and genuinely. Noticing when something triggers you and is ooh, yeah, that still burns, or ooh, yeah, that still matters to me, or yep, still human. Because the goal is not to be untriggerable, if that's a word. We're not supposed to not get triggered. We're human. That's literally why we chose to come to this earth school, is because we knew we would get triggered. We knew we would have these lessons coming at us. We knew that we were going to grow and evolve as a soul and help humanity and other souls along the way. The goal is simply to be self-connected and self-aware when you are triggered. To recognize, again, ooh, yeah, that still burns. How am I going to approach it this time? Am I going to let it ruin my day? Am I going to take it out on other people? Or am I going to choose differently? That's where the growth is in having different outcomes when those triggers happen. And then celebrating yourself for it. Recognizing how far you've come, recognizing that you are consciously choosing something different. So if you're listening to this and you feel like you've been circling back to something old, like a pattern or a feeling or a dynamic that you thought you'd already moved through, just remember that you are not going backwards. I genuinely don't think there is such thing as going backwards in this human existence. You're likely just simply being invited to an even deeper relationship with yourself and with your healing. You are creating this version of self who doesn't need to prove how evolved you are, how healed you are. You are becoming this version of self who doesn't need to rush the lesson, because you trust that your body, your intuition, and your nervous system have their own timeline that is divinely timed. So the next time that something in life doesn't go how you expected, maybe a situation, a conversation, a relationship, or any other experience in life, just pause before you allow yourself to interpret it. Pause before you decide what that means for you. Before you decide, okay, I know this is here for me to grow. We don't always need to jump to that. Just simply ask, what do I need right now? And sometimes the answer is rest, pausing. Sometimes the answer is creating more boundaries, or letting yourself feel grief or sadness, or being honest and authentic with yourself. And if you need one of those things, that doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong right now. It just means that this is something that you need in order to continue forward. Healing isn't about just being done. Healing is about being willing to deepen, to soften, to stay present when shit hits the fan and the ego wants to just jump ahead to the next step. And to me, this is one of the most beautiful parts of the human experience. Is it easy? Hell no. Is it pretty? Not always. Most of the time, this part of the journey is not pretty at all. The other day, I was literally screaming my head off in the car. I was crying. I was talking out loud to my guides. I literally, nothing felt okay. It didn't feel like it was going to be okay. And I let myself be in that. And there were several days after that I allowed myself that. But now I am here talking to you today and sharing this message because I know exactly why I was handed what I was handed. And the only reason that I've been able to come to this place right now and be in front of you talking about this is because of that pause that I took for days. And sometimes it can take weeks and sometimes it can take months. And no matter how long it takes you, that doesn't matter. I want you to remember that in this human experience as a soul in a body, time does not actually exist. I know this is a really hard concept if you're kind of new to like spirituality and things like that, but genuinely, this gives me so much solace when I am going through experiences when I'm like, oh my God, it's been so long. Why haven't I gotten through this? Or I'm falling behind. Just remember that time literally does not exist. Everything happens in divine timing. Everything happens exactly the way and when it's supposed to. I love you. I will talk to you in the new year. Until next time, keep shining, keep aligning, and we'll talk soon.